Let's continue working on the edit page. In this one, we're going to set up those fields and make sure they actually change the data in local storage. The first thing I want to do is load in the necessary scripts, and there are going to be two. The first script that we're going to load in is one that actually already exists. Right here, I'll set up a script tag with the source attribute, and we're going to load in notes-functions.js. So we're going to be taking advantage of some of the functions that we've already written. For example, we're going to be getting our saved notes, we'll be saving notes, and we'll be removing notes from this new page. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. We can simply use the functions that we've already created. And the nice thing too is that this file just sets up a bunch of functions. It doesn't actually call any of them, which means that we can load this in without worrying about messing up the behavior. We're only going to actually see any difference if we start calling functions from this file, which we will. Our next script tag, right here, source attribute, and this is going to be a new file that does not yet exist, but we'll create in about 20 seconds. I'm going to call this one notes-edit.js. Now we can actually go ahead and create the notes edit script file, and that's where we're going to do a lot of the heavy lifting specific to this page. We're not going to be loading in the notes app stuff because this was all specific to the home page. Let's go ahead and create the notes edit file right inside of the app directory, notes-edit.js, and in here, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to kick things off by getting the ID for the note the user is trying to edit. So how exactly are we going to do that? Well, we set up the edit page to have the ID passed into the URL. And in the last video, we saw that on location.hash, we get that value. This is the string ID, but it also contains the hash from the hash part of the URL. So all we're going to do is strip that out. And there's a really convenient method on strings called substring, which allows you to get a substring, a part of an existing string. Let's go ahead and use it real quick right here in the console. So location.hash.substring, and substring takes an argument. This is the index for where you want to start. So if I wanted to get a substring, I pick a starting point, I pick an ending point, and then I get those characters as the new little string. If I wanted to include the first character, I would say I want to start at the index of 0. If I wanted to start at the second character, I would say I want to start at the index of 1, exactly like we would do for arrays, where the index starts at 0. Now, the first argument is the only required one. The second argument is optional. It specifies where you want to end. So if I wanted to get just 2 characters, I would say I want to end not at the index of 0 or 1 or 2, but the index of 3. So this is going to go up to that index, not inclusive. So it's not going to include the item found there. If we run it like this, what do we get? We get B7. We get from the first index up to the third non-inclusive. That's B and 7. Now, if we leave off the second argument, which we're going to do, we just get everything to the end. So here, if we call it just passing in one argument, the value of 1, we start at the first index, we go all the way to the end, and we get our entire ID with the hash removed. That is exactly what we're going to do over in the edit file. Const note ID equals location.hash.substring, getting everything from the first character, not the second, to the very last. All right. Now what we're going to do is get all of the data stored in local storage. That's where we're going to be able to find the title and note values, title and body values. And we want to start off those inputs with those values. So if I already have some information, I want to make sure to render that and not just render empty inputs. Let's go ahead and get an array of notes. Const notes equals, and in this case, we're going to reuse a function we've already written. Over here, we have get saved notes. Local storage is shared across all pages on that domain. So in this case, we can access the same data that was saved. Right here, get saved notes, calling it with no arguments. Now, the next thing we want to do is see if that note ID actually matches a note. If it does, great, we'll continue on. If it doesn't, then we're going to just redirect them back to the dashboard page so they can either create a new note or pick one from the list. So right here, const note equals notes.find. We'll pass in our callback function, which gets called with the individual array items. And we're just going to return true when note.id equals the note ID from the URL. So if note is undefined, we know there was no match. If note is not undefined, we know there was a match. Right here, if. Then we're going to check if note equals undefined. We're just going to kick the user out of this page. Location dot assign, passing in / index.html to get them back to the home page. So now if we save things, we should not get redirected because this is a completely valid ID, one that we actually got by clicking one of the items from the list. But let's go ahead and just delete a few characters. If we delete a few characters and give things a refresh, we're going to see that we do get redirected back here, which is great. If you have an invalid ID, we'll just bring you back here so you can pick a real one. When you pick a real one, it's going to stick. You're not going to get redirected away. So there we have it. We have our first little bit of validation set up. If we get to this point in the code, we know that the note was indeed found, and we can start setting up the page to actually edit the note. First up, we have to get our inputs in place. There are going to be two of them, one for the title, one for the body right here. We're going to use an input for the title, setting up the attributes like we've done before, ID equals note title, and we'll set placeholder equal to some sort of useful placeholder. How about note title? Now we're not going to be using a regular input for the note body. We're going to be using the text area element, which displays a little box where you could have multiple lines of text. That's exactly what we want for editing the body. To do this, we just use the text area tag. Text area is not an empty element, which means we do have a separate opening and closing tag. And then we're just going to add two attributes onto text area. ID, setting it equal to note hyphen body, and then placeholder, setting it equal to some sort of useful placeholder. Enter note text, for example. So the text area is going to render what we see over here in the browser. We have a space where we can enter some text, hit enter, and enter more. And we can also set it up later on to be a little bit bigger by default, maybe about that size. But for now, it's going to be a great start. Over here, we have our title input set up as well. Now the goal is to populate both of these with the initial data. So if we did find a note, that means we have a title and we have a body. We're going to set both of those up. Now we've never set a value on a text area or even worked with text areas before, but they're super similar to our text inputs. We read using the value property, we write using the value property. So right here, document.query selector, we can select first by ID the note title. I can then use value to set the value, and we already have that value. It's under note dot title. Now we're going to do the exact same thing for the body right here, document.query selector, selecting by ID note hyphen body. Once again, we use value and we set it equal to, in this case, note dot body, which is where that information is stored. Now this is going to be a little tricky to actually test since none of our notes have titles or bodies. What I'm going to do is go ahead and save things and then go back to the main homepage and delete all of my notes but one. Then over inside of the local storage viewer, I'm going to go into the actual array and edit the title and body for each. Right here. Here is the title, here is the body. So for title, I'll just put a title, and for body, in between the quotes, I'll put some body text. Now that we have some real information, upon refreshing the page, we should see that show up here. We do. And if I click it, we should see it pre-populated, and it is. We have a title for the title and some body text over there. Now all we really need to work on is doing something when someone changes either of those inputs. And in this case, what we're going to do is allow them to just change the data and we'll save it on the fly. We're not going to set up a separate save button that you could go down that route. We're going to save their changes as they make them. And now actually getting this done is going to be your challenge for the video. So from here on out, it is challenge time. And down below, I'm going to leave you a few steps for how to complete this one. So the big picture goal is to wire up the input, wire up the text area, and create a button that removes the note. So you'd add a new button right here. Let's actually go ahead and do that together just so our HTML file matches. We'll create a new button, remove note, and we'll just give it some sort of ID, remove note. Perfect. So we have the button in place and we can work with a common HTML document. So what you're going to do is wire up all three of those. First up, set up an input event for the title so it can respond to its every change. When that event fires, you want to update the note object above, setting the correct property equal to the new value, and then you want to save the new notes list by calling the function we already created and used in the notes functions file. Then you're going to do the exact same thing for the body. Remember, the text input is basically identical to our regular input in terms of how we interact with it. So we can still read e.target.value, and we can still attach an input event to it. So the code is going to be very similar for those two. Now, once you have both of those wired up, you should actually be able to change some data. For example, I should be able to change this. I should be able to then go back to the main home page and I should see the change reflected. Currently, none of my changes are actually reflected. If I type in here and in here, and I refresh things, all of that data is lost. If you've successfully completed steps 1, 2, and 3, that data will not be lost. And the fourth and final step is to set up that remove button that removes the notes. You already have all of the code for that. We have functions to remove the note from the array. We have functions to save our notes. And what I want you to do at the very end is just redirect them to the home page. So if I delete a note, after the code removes it, there's nothing for them on this page anymore. We're going to send them back to the home page so they can pick a different note or create a new one. Take as much time as you need to knock out these steps. You're really only going to need to edit this file by adding new code, just to give you a little hint as to where you should be doing this sort of thing. All right, pause the video. When you're done, test your work, then come back, click play, and we'll move through it together. How'd you do? Let's go ahead and kick things off by adding the event listener for the title. Now, up above, we actually already select that element. We don't need to select it again. Selecting from the DOM is a little bit expensive. You're not going to notice the difference if you do it a couple of times, but it's best to save this in a variable and then just use it in multiple places. So what we can do is create a variable up above. For example, at the very top of the file, I could create const title element equals, then I can add this query in, copying it and pasting it. And now we don't have to requery for it every time we want to use it. I can simply reference the variable title element right here, setting its value equal to note.title. Now, obviously, this was not part of the requirements for the challenge, but it's a nice optimization, so I'm going to make it right here, body element. I suggest that you do too to get a little bit of practice with this setup. Up above, const body element equals, and then we paste in our selector. So now instead of reselecting things for the event handlers, I can just use title element dot add event listener. I'm going to listen for that input event. I'm going to set up my function. I'm going to get my event argument. And now what are we trying to do? I'm trying to set note.title equal to whatever was typed in. We have that on e.target.value. Then down below, we're going to go ahead and save the notes array. Save notes is the function. We're going to pass in the notes array, and there we go. That feature should be all done. Now, you could have gone ahead and tested this now, or you may have finished all of these steps and then tested. I'm going to give it a quick test right now. So we have a title. I'll swap it out for my new title. I'll hit refresh. And when I do, that data sticks. And if I were to go back to the home page, I would expect to see it in the list, and I do. So there we go. The title is all wired up. The next thing we're going to wire up is the text area. It is very similar to what we have here. So I'm going to take that code and I am going to paste it, not once, but twice, since we'll also be setting up an event for our button. So right here, it's no longer title element we're listening for. It is body element. On change, what are we going to change? Note.body, and there we go. Now we should have body wired up as well. Down below, we want to wire up the remove button. So I can create a variable for that and select it and then use it. Up above, const remove element equals document.query selector. We are selecting by ID. What did I call that one? I called that one remove note. So right here, remove note. Perfect. Now that we have remove element, we can use it down below. Remove element. We are adding an event listener. We are listening for a click since we're dealing with a button. And what are we going to do on click? Well, I mentioned we're going to do those three things. We're going to remove the note, we're going to save the data, and then we're going to redirect them. Now we already have a remove note function, so we can just reuse it. We pass in the ID and we know the note's ID. We have that under note.id. Then the next thing we do is we save our notes. So save notes to make sure the local storage gets updated right here, passing in notes. And the last thing I wanted you to do was just to bring them back to the home page since there's no longer a note to edit. Right here, location.assign, bringing them back to the index.html page. Perfect. We should be all done. Let's go ahead and test our work. I'm going to remove those comments from down below. Save the file and see what happens. Over here, we have some data. I'll change the note title to a title. And then over here, I'll change this to something else. I'll just do 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. If I go ahead and refresh things, what do we get? We get the exact same stuff. If I were to go back to the home page, we do still see that new title. And if I click it, we do indeed come back and see the exact same data that is correctly getting saved. Now, if I click remove note, you can see I am redirected back to the notes dashboard page and that note is gone, which is exactly what we were hoping for. So by using just 30 lines of code, we were able to create and wire up the page for editing our individual notes. Now, if we wanted to, we could also add a button or maybe a link on this page to go back to the home page for when the user is done editing, but they don't want to remove the note. We could just add an anchor tag up above, for example. We could have the text be home and then the href equal / index.html, giving them a way to go back to the notes list without needing to delete it or navigate with the browser's back button. Right here, create note, brings me over to the note. I can make my changes, I can click home, and I should have my latest data, and I do. Perfect. So that's where we're going to stop for this one. There are still a few other things I want to address. So for example, what if I duplicate this tab? I'm going to right click the tab and click duplicate tab. Now I have two instances of the application. If I go over here and I change the title to a new title, the data is indeed getting saved, but other pages that rely on that data aren't updating live. So over here we can see we still have the old title. It would be pretty cool if all of the data updated, even if we had things open in multiple tabs. For example, what if I had the note open in multiple tabs and I typed some text in? This data is indeed getting saved, but it's not getting reflected over here. We're going to fix all of that in the next video, so let's go ahead and jump right in.